with Laura.
Okay.
All right? Yep, got to get close there. Is there any recourse against a car dealer or salesperson who knowingly sells a vehicle to someone with serious memory loss, dementia, Alzheimer's?
So there's supposed to be a 3-day period of time where you can return the car. So if it's within the 3 days, I've never had a dealer refuse to do that. If you're beyond the 3 days, like for example, I had someone call the other day that said that they felt like their family member was taken advantage of, but it was like 5 years or 3 years or something like that. So I think once you start paying on the loan and you're driving the car, you've kind of accepted the terms of the contract that you've signed. But immediately 3 days. Now, if you do have problems, your leverage is always with, and you know, there's a nice thing about having so much online marketing. It matters to these dealerships. So get online, start putting things online, call the Attorney General's office. There's a couple great task force that help seniors who've been taken advantage of. But the minute you show up with that doctor's letter and say 2 years ago they were diagnosed with Alzheimer's, your salesperson should have known that, you need to undo this like yesterday, you usually don't have a problem.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, Jenny. Let's see. If my loved one is receiving skilled home care with physical therapy, can the home care therapist evaluate patient for driving safety?
I guess the short answer I would say is they can. How much accuracy is going to be in that assessment, I would question. So remember, my recommendation would be that we are having a clinical assessment as well as a behind-the-wheel assessment. And having that experience with being able to identify the areas of concern on the road and how we can generalize that in the areas of safety that they will produce. So typically a physical therapist just out in the community isn't going to be able to accurately assess driving.
Okay, thank you. All right, Dr. Spahn. Let's see. Is there any age when most people should stop driving?
Well, I would say not. It would all be very individual. I would point out, like at University of California, San Diego, there was headed by the research, Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, is headed by Claudia Kawas. And they have a big program, what they call the oldest old. And the only way to get into that program is if you are 90 years or older. And they're studying people, why they made it to 90, why they have normal cognition. It was on the news, like I think on 60 Minutes, and they had this elderly woman. She was 92. She walks 3 miles a day. She drives her VW Beetle all over the place. And she does care work for people that are less fortunate than hers. And, there's no issue because she's highly functional. I think that would be the whole key. It depends on your functional abilities and how well you are cognitively and physically active at that point in time.
Okay, I would agree with you. If that means anything. But I'm in charge. Let me remind you of that. Lori. Let's see. Can you talk about people not wanting to give up driving due to limited resources in rural areas?
Yeah, that's really a tough situation. I think the more urban areas have much more resources in terms of volunteer rides. But I would say that's two things often happen. One is often in more rural communities, we need to be in touch with like the Area Agency on Aging or the Alzheimer's Association. We need to be bringing resources to that person, or to be honest, in many cases, that person ends up moving closer to family so that they can get support. or closer to more resources. And that's one of the examples I gave as a gentleman I just met with who lives in Wickenburg, and he moved into an assisted living community, and he has a lot of friends there who can help support him. But he had to move into assisted living because he just couldn't manage an independent living without having those rides, and there weren't a lot of resources there. So his plan B was to try to make it work in assisted living without this dog, or to move into the Phoenix area where his son and daughter-in-law are, and be able to live in maybe in an independent living situation for a period of time, whereby he could access more of the driving and transportation resources.
Thank you. Dr. Spahn, if someone with Parkinson's freezes while walking, does this carry over to driving?
Surprisingly, the freezing occurs primarily with walking. Most often occur going down a narrow hallway or crossing a doorway, and that's when freezing will really occur. Or if they're going from a sitting to standing position, then they want to initiate gait, and there'll be this frozen effort that they'll try to move. But once they're in a car, they actually function quite well. So it really shouldn't be an issue with freezing while driving.
Very interesting. Okay. Taking a note. Jenny, let's see. If you have bad driving habits, most of your driving life, racing through yellow lights, etc., how does that influence the driving assessment for old age? These are great questions.
They are. That's a great question. So this. Who asked that question? Yeah. By a raise of
Before
hand.
you leave.
Yeah, really. So my first response would be that if you saw me sitting next to you with my clipboard, with my assessment, and you knew that I was taking notes on your ability to drive, you would sit up a little straighter and put your hands at 10 and 2 and drive better than you would normally when you're alone. That's just human nature. We call that a testing effect. And so if somebody is demonstrating those behaviors during my assessment, I know that they are going to be 10 times worse when they're alone and I'm not sitting there next to them taking my notes. So that would be my first thought. But the fact of the matter is that no matter what your bad habits are, my goal and my job is to make sure that you're a safe driver. Now that could be that that we come back to the office following our behind the wheel assessment and say, you know what, Mr. Jones, these are the concerns that I have, and I currently with the behaviors or the skills that you demonstrated during our assessment, you're not a safe driver. And so maybe we need to revisit some of those and improve those bad habits, because all of us have some bad habits, right? All of us have something that we should probably be improving upon. But if you are demonstrating those during my assessment, I've got concerns.
And I know one of the questions that came up was how much does a driving evaluation cost? Maybe you could address that.
Yeah. So a driving assessment really is going to vary on the type of assessment that you're completing. And so once you call the office and you speak to our staff, then we'll be able to determine that. But the most expensive assessment is going to be the full clinical, full on-road assessment. That's going to be $160 an hour for about 3, maybe 3.5 hours. So we're looking at approximately $500.
Okay. That was one of the questions, so I made that note. Thank you. Laura, legally, what should I do if my loved one insists on driving if they have been told to stop? Legally, what should I do?
So the only person who can stop that person from driving is the motor vehicle department. So you personally as a caregiver can submit information, and then they can take away their driver's license. If that's not possible, if for some reason you couldn't do that, you could apply for a guardianship for the purpose of having someone's driver's license taken away. But anything involving the court and multiple attorneys, I'm just saying, and you still have the practical issue of how do you practically stop that? Because you can still get in a car without a driver's license, and people do it all the time. So you have to be more creative. But I would not necessarily recommend you go to the court to have that ordered, because there are so many other unknowns involved in that, and it's kind of a place of last resort.
Really,
the
anybody
idea
could fill out a driver condition report. Right?
Absolutely.
So that's the form that I was referencing earlier. Anybody could fill that out, even anonymously.
I like the idea of, again, because I'm personally going through this, is, oops, car doesn't start. Or in the case of my mom, it's an older car, and yeah, things are going wrong. So that option might even be something that I have to use with my brothers, is that, sorry, Mom, the car no longer runs, which may not be far-fetched in quite honestly. So I like that one. I don't know if it works, but it might be something in your toolbox. I like that, something doesn't work with the car and we have to, and then change the subject.
And Lori's point is a good one. It's anonymous, so
Fill the driver condition
when
report.
in doubt, you don't know who filed it, you don't know who told them, you don't know what happened, you're so sorry. But some people don't care. Again, you might say, hey, your driver's license was revoked, you can't drive, and they may get in the car and drive it anyway. So that's another issue that you have to deal with.
And that's where it's a two-part problem. I think you come up with the filling out a driver condition report, and then you have to disable the car, and then you have to remove the car from vision. Because again, when you're obsessed about driving, because that's been such an important part of your life, you don't want to look out and see that car every day, because it's going to trigger that anger and it's going to trigger that argument, and you want to remove those triggers from the conversation as much as possible.
Thank you for that. Dr. Spahn, please comment on the increasing research and practice in functional medicine. Period.
Yeah.
Do you need me to repeat that?
No.
Please comment on the, increasing research and practice in functional medicine.
I really don't know what the question is, so I really can't comment. I would just be.
I didn't write the question, but I know what you're referring to. May I contribute?
Sure.
Like, for example, even right now, Dr. Mark Hyman has a webinar on this week about how you can reverse brain shrinkage. Dr. Daniel Amen has his PBS series. Those people who have entered that discussion of neuroplasticity.
Well, the thing is with neuroplasticity, the problem is that, well, we can just address that, is that as the cells die, the remaining cells take over function. And so that's the problem with neuroplasticity, is that you might have 100 cells performing a function in the brain, let's say. 50% of them die, and they're projecting or connecting to another area so that other 50 cells pick up the slack. But that means more stress on those remaining cells. And if they continue to die on a regular basis, because that's maybe one of the places where neurodegeneration is occurring, there's more and more stressors till it actually reaches a critical mass where the surviving cells can no longer function themselves because they're so overloaded. And by overloaded, I mean that the metabolic demands being placed on them is so significant. Because what these cells are trying to do, even as you age, they're trying to formulate new connections to, place the connections where they should go. Sometimes we're talking about a small cell that might be 50 microns in diameter that's growing, the connections might be several feet in length. And the cell has to maintain those connections, maintain their health in that. And that takes a lot of energy and resources that the cell may have in the beginning, but eventually they become exhausted, and that's where those connections fail. With Dr. Amen, I know he's in California. I'd rather not comment on him because there's a lot of issues with what he's done. I've had personal interaction with him, both in the clinic and in courts, And I'll just leave it at that. But there's a lot of issues. And so,
Okay. All right. Jenny, what if someone has increased anxiety when driving with a stranger? Will this cause a problem when assessing them?
No.
Do, do, do.
Yeah. I guess I don't know. I don't know that. It's a good question. But the fact of the matter is that that's the basis of the assessment is that I have to be able to be in the vehicle and ask somebody to follow this route and demonstrate these skills and that kind of thing. My thought would be, if that is anxiety provoking, what else about driving also
Good point.
provokes anxiety and affects that safety?
Good point. Okay, thank you. Let's see. We're moving through these pretty well, pretty quickly. Okay. Laura, under Arizona law, if a person's license to drive has been revoked, does that also mean they cannot operate a golf cart?
You do have to have a driver's license to operate a golf cart in Arizona. So the answer is yes, but you could have a restricted driver's license that says you can only drive a golf cart, which I'm not sure is a super great idea because, first of all, you have less protection. And second of all, you have a different set of rules that are probably newer, harder to follow, and people do all kinds of crazy things in golf carts here. So legally, the answer is that you shouldn't be driving a golf cart without a license.
Good, thank you.
And
I have a question for you.
okay.
You can finish.
And I just wanted to add to his comment. I see people there is so much money because there's so much fear in losing your memory. And just be super careful of these people who are praying and using this idea of giving you hope that you're going to reverse brain damage that's been in place for 25 and 30 years. Just be really careful.
Very good point. Thank you.
And thank you for that. But I have a question because I came from California and also from Texas, and I never saw so many golf carts. But the question is, should they be wearing safety belts, seat belts? I mean, when I've been at a stoplight and I saw this one gentleman go through it, he made the stoplight just barely, but he hit a bump and like the golf cart literally lifted off the ground, and he looked like he was going to come out. Then he fell back into his seat and just kept on going. So my question to you is, if they are using the golf carts for transportation, they're using it for various activities, shouldn't they have seatbelts in those?
So I think the answer is yes, but probably most of you have golf carts. Any of you have golf carts that don't have seat belts? Because I see them without seat belts all the time. And you're supposed to be driving them in that restricted lane, but people don't. They drive them in the regular traffic all the time. So I think if you're in regular traffic, you have to. And I mean, just for safety purposes, I mean, now you're in a tin can with absolutely no protection. It's crazy.
Did you hear that? Okay. If a golf cart is going to be street legal, she was saying that it needs to go through the motor vehicle, have a driver's license on it, and then you were saying it needs to have all of the regulations that a motor vehicle would have, blinkers, all that.
But again, how many times when you purchase a second-hand golf cart, how many of you took your golf cart in to have it re-looked at by a motor vehicle? Like, they don't have time for that. So it's not being looked at. It's not being addressed. You have them changing hands all the time. Yes.
I looked up the laws on golf carts, and it's not mandatory to have a seatbelt on a golf cart.
Wow.
And they're also supposed to drive, like you said, closest to the curb, which most of them do not.
It's not mandatory to wear a helmet when you ride a motorcycle, so I think, using good judgment is really important.
Yep. Okay, good questions. All right, Lori. My husband has been told not to drive by his physician, but he insists on driving and gets angry if I bring it up. What can I do?
I think you should have a conversation with the physician, have the physician remind your spouse, and then put it in writing. And then I think if all else fails, you just have the car removed. You take it out of sight. And sometimes this is just such a big battle. I mean, I've had 60-minute sessions with couples that have seen one of our neurologists, and the person comes in and they are just raging at me that they're so angry that this doctor, took away their license. But make the doctor the bad guy. I'd rather see the professional the bad guy than you as your spouse, right? You have to live with that person. Dr. Spahn can handle it. But when you live with that person, you don't want it to be a constant battle between the two of you. Then you just keep reminding that person that, yeah, I know, I agree with you, but the doctor is the one who, is the expert in this area, and we have to follow what he or she says.
And if you have a doctor that won't say that, and you know that needs to be said, because some doctors want to be nice and productive and not cause conflict, you need to find another doctor. That's my personal opinion.
Good point. Yes, sir.
I've had some people who have purchased a club and put it on the steering wheel. Wow. And then they just play dumb. I'm not sure how that got there, but I think we'll have to have it towed, and someone's going to have to, wrestle it off.
Right. Good information. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Mechanic tip.
My concern is the people that are on the road that should not be driving their cars that might not be aware of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good excuse too, is to letting people know that, you're worried about the traffic patterns, you're worried about other drivers, and those things can have an impact. But also, it is important to recognize that as memory loss progresses, that person's ability maybe not to get from, one block to the other changes, but their ability to handle something in a crisis changes. So if they're driving to and from and they're doing just fine, what happens that one day that a bicyclist crosses their path too quickly? Are they going to be able to react in enough time?
And I personally have had several clients die in golf cart accidents. When you go against a car and you're in a golf cart, you lose. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. It doesn't matter. So you have to keep that in mind when you're sending them out in their golf cart, with diminished capacity and ability to make decisions.
So my comment on that would be, why are we headed to golf carts? What advantage do we think that has versus buying if it's the size of the vehicle, then go buy a Toyota Corolla. I'm not sure that they're significantly different in price, but at least you have a door. Seatbelts, airbags, exactly. All of those safety features that we've designed into our vehicles to be, to be safe to be on the road. If you're going to drive a vehicle on a golf course, then clearly the golf cart is your best option. They're not going to let you take your Corolla onto the golf course. But if we're running to the Safeway, then why have we decided that a golf cart is the best option? But if you're on a road that is higher than that, you're the hazard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and they're not supposed to be on the road. Sure. Yeah. But that would be my concern is why do we feel like golf carts are the way to go? And we could have a whole long conversation about the mortality of an individual over specific ages related to a car accident, that a relatively minor car accident for somebody over the age of 75 is significantly more fatal than somebody who is 35 getting into that same exact accident and having the same exact injuries. So we want to sort of begin to justify why we need to be out there driving, the economics of driving, the health-related risks that we're taking with driving, those sorts of things as well.
Great point.
I think a good point too when you're considering driving is think about is that person with memory impairment, would you let them drive around your neighbor's child or your grandchild? Mm-hmm. That sometimes can help you make the answer clearer in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Jenny, does your driving assessment program, is it recognized by and accepted by the Department of Motor Vehicles?
It is. So we have to be licensed by the Motor Vehicle Department in order to complete the assessment. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
How do you determine how, like you said, the class starts at a basic level. How do you determine how much?
Well, yeah. So in a nutshell, although there's a few different assessments, let's talk about two on the spectrum. So the full driving assessment, which is what I quoted you, is going to be for somebody who has had some sort of a medical incident that we're addressing. So let's just take a stroke. Let's say somebody has a mild stroke and wants to return to driving, but physician is not sure if they still have the reaction time or the decision making or the visual fields or the visual acuity or whatever it is related to that stroke, if they're still a safe driver. That is going to trigger a full driving assessment for us that is quite detailed, both clinical assessment and on the road, and we're going to require a doctor's prescription to complete that assessment, and it's going to, no matter what the result, trigger the medical review program of the Motor Vehicle Department. Now, you may all not know that every motor vehicle department across the country has a medical review program. If you have in Arizona, if you have a change in your medical status, you're supposed to notify the motor vehicle department. So not everybody does it. I entirely understand. Most people don't, unless they're coming through a program. And so if I determine So we're going to have you complete that medical review program because, first of all, you're supposed to be. And second of all, if I complete a driving assessment and understand that you're not safe to be driving, I don't want all that responsibility. I need to be able to report that back to your physician and to the motor vehicle department. Now, the fact is that if the motor vehicle or if your physician feels like you're still safe to be driving, then he can report that to the motor vehicle department through a similar form to the driver condition report. There's another form called the medical examination report that a physician fills out. That physician can say, no, you know what, I think that Mary Lou is fine to be driving. And the motor vehicle department will take that recommendation over ours. But we will have sent our report to the doctor, and he'll have, the physician will be aware of the results of that driving assessment. So that driving assessment is just more involved than somebody who might take what we call a senior safety assessment. The senior safety assessment is designed for somebody who purely that does not have a medical diagnosis. They haven't had a stroke, or they don't have neuropathy or an amputation or MS or whatever medical diagnosis that somebody might have, dementia, Alzheimer's. If you have those diagnoses, we have to put you through medical review. And the fact of the matter is that you want that to happen because you want it to be documented that you're a safe driver post-stroke. If you have not had a medical condition that could affect your ability to drive, we will complete a senior safety assessment. That does not involve the medical review program because there's nothing to report. And so the assessment is abbreviated and therefore less expensive.
Just want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank all of our panelists. I think this was a great production today. It was great to have all of your questions and participation.